to sort of close our 3 weeks here, we thought it'd be nice not only to talk of what we've done, but to give you a sense of a sense of some of the things we've been doing through showing you. And so we'll be at work. So it's, I guess, we'll use this schedule to revisit some ideas, some thoughts, and see what happens. But yeah, it's very much in the doing.
And we're going to work in silence.
Yeah, we've enjoyed that.
So
it's really cool. Yeah.
So you'll hear the sounds. And,
yeah.
You know, I guess we're responding to the sounds too.
Yeah.
So, but we'll be talking a little bit afterwards and talking with you hopefully.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Et dans la rue voisine, surviennent les premières égratignures. Les autres qui, dès la première enfance, volontairement ou pas, le ciel le modèle, le façonne, lui inculque des croyances familiales, des rites, des attitudes. maybe just a little overview of the last 3 weeks. Maybe to say that Helen and I were invited to work on this together, but didn't know each other really before we started. We had a few meetings, so I think we probably spent 4 or 5 hours together before starting on this. So quite an incredible opportunity really to be allowed in somebody else's process in this way. It's pretty unique. Let's see, we arrived in Farnham we brought with us a suitcase. We probably, I think those of you went, you saw. Yeah, we thought maybe a nice way in would be to bring some things that mattered to us, something that we had something to say about, to share. So that was one of the first things we did. Unpacking and laying out and sharing that with one another.
All that you can see still needs to fit back in the suitcase. So we have accumulated stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to fit that. Yeah, it felt that very important that we were meeting in this specific place, and so we collected things of the place, and I think the fact that we were here in many ways informed what we decided to do. In the first week we were taken around the different departments of the university, introduced to the people who worked there or studied, and for me it was a chance to put my hands in some clay and feel the weight of the rod and the glass blowing workshop and things like that, which was really, which I really enjoyed, and that is a completely alien world to me. And alongside that, there have been lots of layers of conversations with people invited to come as contributors, stroke agitators, or to ask us questions, and these sharings every Friday.
And a lot of talking between us. It seems like we share a lot in common and not just sort of source material, because we obviously are quite interested in some similar things. I'm interested in traces, and we both seem to move around a lot in different ways, including geographically. So in my work I'm quite interested in now thinking about material in place, what's there and what is left behind and what you can gather of that. And all the materials that we've been using are either brought by one of us, a lot of them are from other places and collected sort of specially on the way because they sort of denote a place for me, a sort of memory of place, and then other items are collected from here. So we've been using that as some material. And I like to find things, and we were quite lucky we have the recycling bins outside
a great source of material.
In many ways, because we sort of watched people's activity as well out of the window and what they were doing and what's happening here. So there's been a time shift while we've been here. It's gone from being busy-ish to extremely quiet. There's a lot of mending going on at the moment, mending and fixing, which I think has kind of impacted on some of what we've been thinking. And the quietness has been very enjoyable because it sort of mirrored our 3 weeks. I'd say the first week went past very, very quickly, and it was basically about
settling our ground,
finding, changing the room. You haven't seen the room today in the state we've been working in. We had to kind of make it a bit our own. and then, as you said, exploring. And then this week we've had more time and space together, and some periods of time like this, just doing and exploring the space, exploring what's in here. I mean, I could probably spend a year in here. There's so much stuff I don't know if you want to have a wander around afterwards. But
I'm enjoying the sound and see what making.
And I should say I trained in metal, so my interest in that metals and looking for metal things and trying to use the feel of something, of how I might work in metal in making these marks is quite key. So there's a metallic nature to some of the marks left behind, I think. Especially things like this spoon.
And we came also with lots of questions for each other, but also we were given, Sue Davis gave us lots of questions, you know, in terms of...
I haven't got, my other book, you got them?
I think I do.
And we sort of, actually I had a book with the questions that I kept. It was kind of there, and we reminded ourselves.
Yeah, of what those were. And actually maybe there were 4, did I note those down?
There's somebody performing for us.
Okay, maybe those 4. Do artists have common questions that trigger work into being? Can the artist of one medium broaden the inquiry of the other? Is it possible to unpeel the early stages of collaboration? How does an artist arrive at their thinking, and how they make adjustments as their lives and thinking evolve? What's that?
Like questions. I think we've also been interrogating, and we've been asked a lot about the nature of side by side. What does that mean in the first instance, in the first week? What did we think it meant before we arrived? Then what did it feel like at the end of the first week? And then the nature of how that's developed and what that means. And I think we've gone through different versions of side by side, and I think we'll continue to do that.
Yeah. And it feels like we're at a stage where we need to. It feels like it's been so full of things that now we are at a stage where we need to sort of, to use one of your words, Helen, to do some sifting, to sort of make choices, maybe clarify some line of inquiry. So yeah, focus in a little bit.
But some big shifts have happened for me.
Yeah, the same as mine.
Some of the things that I find particularly interesting are, for me, I quite often work alone, but I do work with other people, but working quietly with Layla. Those have been the best bits, those quiet bits where you can hear. And we have sometimes worked to music, and they're quiet too, but it's when you can hear something. But we've enjoyed all the people around us as well, so the activity, things happening around us, and they've sort of come in to stuff. But for me, I've always had a bit of a thing about end points and not liking end points, because I guess I went through a training that was about making functional objects in a way, and I always resisted and always got told to get back in the workshop and keep on going with it. And actually my work's really about process, and I guess that's the way of thinking. But surprisingly, I really enjoyed the idea of endpoint, especially this week. Had a new kind of understanding of a moment of end in a time frame, and that's a really great,
a mini revelation.
Yeah, that's really
Yes, and I think well, I have plenty of questions still. One thing that I really enjoyed was somehow being with Helen, just something about how she looks at things, being able to be a witness to that, her particular attention to things, her angle of approach, as it were, where she points the camera. It has been fascinating to see.
Some of the big things I think that there are to unpack still are perhaps about the nature of the traces, so those that are left and those that you can see and those that are invisible or gone.
Because I'm also interested in traces in my work, and in the last few I've been attempting to make the absence visible when the performer is left, or what's left. I'm interested in that. Making the absence visible, or traces of a presence or something. And in this context, I was aware as we went along that we were accumulating traces of what we were doing, what Helen was inviting me to join her in. That was really concrete, and I was like, oh, but what are the traces we're leaving of what I've invited you in? It's like they're in your consciousness maybe, and in mine, and imprinted somewhere. But they're not for everybody to see, are they? No. At this stage.
No, but some of the memories that come back as well. Memories of sound, and so some of the things that come back through that silence for me, through some of the not leaving a trace, for me, evokes a different memory, so I can remember. I can remember something else.
Yeah.
Remember differently.
I love the fact that having other material gives me an opportunity, though, of the movement or whatever to leave traces behind. I've been really enjoying that, be it paper or whatever it is. That there are things that are marked by what we're doing.
And then there's the notion of being recorded as well, which for me has been very interesting because I'm not usually filmed. I have been filmed a little bit, but not very much. And so some of that's been really interesting. We haven't actually looked back at a lot of the work we've done together, which is we've got 2 weeks now, and I think that's a really important part to see what that means. But
something shifts when you're being watched.
Yeah,
is that's I think we accept that. But I'm really fascinated by what that is, and I don't have the answer. But that's something that I'm really fascinated by. How one might be able to stay as close as who they are in performance, in being watched or not. What is at play there? I find that really interesting. And the moments when we were on our own were on the whole quite few, really. We were often watched. There was often, and so I'm quite interested in looking into that a little bit more.
Yeah. And another thing that we've spoken about quite a lot, so forgive me if you've heard this before, but we have talked quite a lot now, so when Sue and Ali came to see me first, Sue left me thinking about behind. And I don't often think about behind me because my world is here. And so, but then I really did start thinking about it and noticing, and the thing that I really noticed was that actually sound was really important. So not just when I'm by myself, but with other people, different scenarios. Then you're using your hearing and listening a lot to make sure that things are working. And one of the things I've spoken about is when in my training, at points there could be 80 people hammering together in a workshop, but because there's a strike, you're striking in unison, then everybody hits the pattern, and so if somebody's out, you can hear. And it's also how the work kind of evolves. So I've really tuned into some of that. I'm really, it's reminded me of that. But it's also, I think I've been tuning in a bit. So we've been doing, there's been a lot of listening.
Yeah. Listening, yeah, improvisation or setting little tasks to one another or to
So
do
we've
together.
gone through different tasks from our different points of view.
Yeah, yeah.
And they've been great because they're like new ways of doing things.
new territory.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's also exciting and the opportunity to disrupt patterns and ways of doing. Amazing, and this is one.
Yeah.
It's starting. I mean, this is one of the questions that was put to us at the beginning, and this is at the top of my list at the moment. One of those questions that seem to matter at the moment is how this connection might just gently invite me or push me out of certain ways of doing things. That's very exciting.
Yeah, and there were quite a lot of things that really struck me, but one of the things in regard to the behind thing as well was being filmed from behind and not aware of the camera, and watching that and watching our hands working together. So we were working, as you came in, there were some print tables, we were working at these tables, and in my studio I work at a table, although I think I'm going to have to clear a space for the floor. It was great the way our hands
came in and out of sync in a way.
Yeah.
Sometimes consciously, sometimes not.
And then a piece of activity around us would come into frame, and that would be interesting as well. So we're quite interested in, how you might see this as well. You might see us doing what we've just done, or maybe when we've been filming much more focused on something, or
the frame of things.
The frame of things. And that I've really enjoyed. I mean, you saw me. You can go and see where I was going if you want afterwards, but I've really enjoyed exploring around here. But I love that thing that you can hear on the edges, what's going on. So you can hear somebody doing, and when people have been working in here, that's what you hear. So if you have a wander around at the back here, it's almost like a forest clearing. Somebody's got a loom set up through here, but you have to sort of wander through to find it. And that's been really nice. And I think that's quite important in what we've been doing. The inside, outside. The inside and the outside.
Looking in, looking out. I keep saying that. Just kind of a concern with enough time, space, or a flow that would be uninterrupted for a while to sort of allow sort of looking in as well as taking out looking out. It's been amazing to wander, as you say, and to see and to feel, to touch, to hear, and just I don't know. Now I feel now that there's a real time for which I could processing time maybe, and just work out what that might do from inside out. If that makes sense. Do you know how we're doing?
Well, we've probably got about 10 minutes worth of questions, but I wanted to just, because people that have come in haven't had the luxury that I've had in seeing some of the things that you're doing today, actually where they started. And I wondered if you could go back to, I don't know if you remember at the beginning, Layla was tearing pieces of paper with her feet. It'd be really interesting to go back to that original task that you two did together and just talk through that and how you've got to that point.
Yes. We're in this space just slightly, just over there. Initially we had all those roles and I can't remember what we were even thinking. I think it was just about marking territory in a way.
Framing. I mean, we've talked One of the contributors that's coming to see us, Annie, talked to us about environment and sort of marking out your territory, and paper has been that for me, and we were doing the same there with rolls of paper, so that's where that.
And I guess before that it came from, we were trying to, I could go back to quite a way, but I guess we did this exercise with just the hands and just 5 movements that we shared, and there was something in this improvisation that I felt was great about the quality of listening, but it was very simple. It felt like a first step to something. The second step we took was to say, let's try with actually making something. So we started this lots of stuff, paint and tape, and so, but it didn't work. It was too many elements and wet fingers can't rip tape, and so it was messy. So on that very day, we went from using lots of things to make to distilling down to only a ripping action, and we were doing that at the tables over there, and then we migrated there, and it was still, so it was rolling and ripping action together. Yeah, and so this is what I used here, I guess, this idea of marking territory, of making a path for myself, and then ripping, and just keeping what was necessary to stand on, and then we had talked, and that just came to my mind at the time of breaking things in the smallest possible pieces. And it was kind of an unfinished idea in a way. That's what came in next. I guess today, as well as revisiting things that we've done, what I had set myself was to try, as a task in a way, was to try and be equally, totally involved in what I was doing, and as totally tuned into what Helen was doing, and finding what that space between is, and allowing what she was doing to impact on what I was doing. So there was a moment where I left that, because what you were doing pulled me somewhere else. Don't know if that is there something. No, was there something about it that?
Well, no, it was just it had moved on from the hands to the feet, essentially. So you were using your feet as well as your hands.
I was using my feet to steady it in a way, wasn't I? And then ripping,
But we've got very good at ripping. We discovered that we've got quite a mechanism for ripping. We've got very good at rolling up paper. We spent a whole day rolling up paper together, and I can now roll up a length of paper just like this. Those railings outside are excellent for rolling paper on from either side. You can actually make it taut in the right weather conditions.
Yeah, we found out.
But also discovered that, and this is partly through the glass blowing, that when you break, so you've made the mark on the glass, so I don't know what that's called, when you make the mark, and then you tap the end to...
breaking off the punch, yeah. Or if you necking in and...
Nicking in.
So it's probably in one of the films, but anyway, they tap the end and the piece of glass comes up, which is just great. So anyway, we discovered through this that we could one of us could tap the end and it would tear perfectly as we went. And actually through another thing that was really nice, being able to work together, was we spent, I love this about what I do, that you can get very involved in something seemingly banal, like rolling up paper, and just find joy in every time you do it, there's a different way. So we spent a lot of time rolling up paper and then pulling it out, and it kind of screams, and so do your fingers, because it was getting stuck on our fingers. But the thing that was really interesting, I thought, was then Layla was putting a shock through the paper, and I think the eloquence of what you do was coming through the paper. You would have to see it, but it was just quite incredible. But also just things like talking about, we spent some time, and I think this is quite important as well, talking about words that I use in a material sense, like malleability, and I was I'm still intrigued by the sort of plasticity of paper, for example. You know, that we were being able to pull it so far, and this is paper that tears very easily, but it's it's like a whole other thing. But that some of the tearing came from that, so it was a sort of back and forward. Let's try that out, going off, doing something else.
And it feels like there is a cyclical, the ideas sort of moving along in this way, in a way. The ideas seem to merge a little bit, or imbue a little bit. I don't know if there are other questions, maybe we should open it up.
It's called Side by Side. Is that the name of this specific project, or is this project part of something bigger called Side by Side?
It's the name of the project.
This specific project.
Right. How do you think this will affect your work now? On Monday, whichever it is, and you both go back to your usual environment and work.
Well, it feels that we're right bang in the middle of it, although we're going apart for 2 weeks, but then again together for another 3 weeks. And so it feels a little early to eloquently discuss how we're really, but
no,
having said that,
there are things. There are major things really, but it's hard to articulate some of it.
Yes.
I mean, I can see a new repertoire of things happening for me because I've added in some things that Lena's brought to me and some things that have happened along the way. And
I think it will, it will definitely leave imprints, but it's hard to tell. I think there'll probably be layers of those, probably some next week when I'm doing something at my house, I'll be thinking, oh, there'll be some ripples there, and probably will be some in 2 years' time, I guess, as well. But I'm sure once we've completed this first phase, we'll have a better sense of that, I imagine.
I work with my body all the time, but it's made me really think about that. So that will be quite a big change, I think. And that way of shifting things, where you need to go to maybe shift some around, which has probably just started, and I don't know where this will come out, but I think there will be a shift somewhere for me.
Some questions around what performing is, audience. I think we touched on that a little bit, but that's coming to the fore. How the difference between a movement with a function, one without one other than, I can't find the word, but moving movement has no other purpose than.
It's interesting as well because I haven't been using metal here, but what will happen when I go and use that? What will happen when I go and enamel? What happens to the marks that I made? Has something changed to the rhythm of them? Are they faster, slower? There's a lot of just that, and that's just one thing I feel.
Just a sort of practical, technical question. In the enamelling, I'm not completely sure of the process, but some of the rhythmic things that you've been doing, could you apply that to?
Because basically the enamel I use is liquid, and when it dries, it's like plaster. And so it's like paper. I just consider it as a paper surface, and then it's fired. So I draw into the paper surface, and then it's fired. And then I grind it back to make it more matte, because I really enjoy this surface. I really, this is really important. And but I think what is more intriguing, but actually what you didn't see, partially because just because I'd started to go there yesterday but didn't include it just now, is how do you go from the flat to off the page, or I think, and that's what I have to consider with my work, because I go from back and forward from 2D to 3D. For example, doing this in a way I've gathered marks from the three-dimensional objects, and there's something that I can recognise of some of them in that. I think in fact, I didn't want to label these because I want to be able to recognise what they are through those marks, but then taking that back off the page and into something else is a different activity. So that's a difficult bit as well.
Yeah.
But that might be interesting when we're together thinking about the space and how you do that. Yeah.
Next stage might be.
Onto the walls or into the space or just off the page.
Yeah.
You talked about kind of coming with those suitcases full of things that matter to you, and kind of having to go back with the same suitcases and trying to bring the new things. Are there things that don't matter so much anymore and that you're going to take out of the
Very
suitcases?
few. One or two things.
You've done it this morning. I think we consider ourselves both not very good at throwing away, but I think that's a time thing.
Yeah.
I was remembering another project of mine that I do with some other people, and waiting 6 months to edit out, and then it was easy. But like out. But at the time it was just like, no, can't. Don't know what's important.
There's a few things that have probably been it, but
We've even got crushed up sticky tape.
yeah.
So like you said at the beginning, that like the end point was something that you were always trying to avoid, but now.
No, I
Well, it's a feeling of sometimes working together and recognising something together that we've reached an end, and we had moments of that, which I think.
No, it's lovely. Or something rolling off, and because we've been filmed, it hits the camera. I mean, that's just an obvious one, but a sound, or yes. So that's like a whole new exciting thing, and that's a real revelation, because I really have had quite a sort of. I mean, they're only words, but it's just like this. It's nice.
Just then, I mean, this is also the opportunity of sort of reconsidering context and what, for me, like I guess the obvious route would be to prepare work that would be shown in the theatre as part of a triple bill or full evening of 1 hour. There are some, and that feels like we can. There's a hope that there might be some sort of sharing of work at the end, in another stage, and that's exciting. Prospect that if there was, it could be anything.
I think you kind of just have half answered this sort of question, but are you able to kind of locate a kind of boundary, however permeable it might be, between exploring the performative nature of kind of being and doing, of making a piece of work, whether that's art in its broadest term, and also the nature of a performance, if you like, as a kind of definite article of the performance as product. So is there a kind of shifting boundary between the idea of the performativity of the making, but then the performance of the made? Is that something that's kind of shifting between? That's
something that I've been thinking about, because I remember in the first, I was about to present something when we first met in London, and then I was introduced to your Helen, speaking of resting points as opposed to end points, and for me that was like, oh, because I was about to show something and to I guess, sorry, I'm kind of going round, but I like to think of a performance as a continuation as opposed to a finishing thing, because there's something, you were definitely a third actor in this today. But I think if I understand, I mean, I was wondering, as I was doing here today, working on this today, what the difference was between this and, say, having worked on a piece for a certain block of 2 months and presenting that at the end. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think there is a difference, but I'm not sure what that is. I don't know. Maybe something with, I think something out of having done something over time, as opposed to opening an exploration like this was to be witnessed.
Do you think the change in context, physical context of the second leg would change, in that although you haven't brought many of the kind of overt skills, if you like, of the kind of craft workshops here, the kind of the spaces seem to have provided a lot of food, how you kind of made marks. Do you think that would be very different when you go into the studio at the Elephant, which is essentially a very sort of naked space, and you can't step outside and find a load of intriguing bobbins?
Well,
how far are the nearest skips to the
Ellen was already planning for finding ways
I'm
out
going to
around.
list these pots.
Well, we were saying, what if, because we embraced the idea that we arrived here and we filled the space with things, and we were saying, what if we start with this empty space and choose the elements that we bring in, and what would that do?
Choose them much more carefully.
Tension.
Yeah.
I think it will change. Yeah, I think we've been talking a little bit or a lot about environment and just conditions in which you're making, and if it's carpet or if it's concrete or if you're going to wear socks or if and that they do change. If the ceiling is really high, what kind of movement and all that, all of those things matter.
I mean, that was a big thing, the carpet to this. I mean, the carpet, that circle there is drawn on the carpet, and it changes the.
So that's of the place.
The place, it locates the place, but there are also the conditions that you like the hard floor, or the light space. The light's really important to me. In fact, I almost felt in the green room sort of blinded by the light, because it's that very low light, and we had to turn the lights off a lot to be able to work in there.
And so that was interesting in that we then started using film as a lighting source, and then hearing things, and then what we heard from that feeding in what we were doing.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, wasn't it? Responding to the conditions.
So those
something
bits of
creative came
things
out.
that come into what you're doing, the passing things, and we've had a lot of fun. Did you do it as well? That was just brilliant.
I'm sorry, I didn't get
We've had so much fun with these shreddings, but it could be quite libelous in the college, because they've obviously been shredded for a reason, but Labour was reading them out in the earlier.
We'll keep them. We'll bring them.
And sorry, just one thing. At the beginning, you didn't have your shoes on. When you started, I thought, oh my god, I wasn't expecting to see you work without shoes. But then you put them back on.
Oh, yeah. No, I've got them on now. I suppose
Did you always work barefoot?
No, but since I've been here, I have. And I wouldn't normally work on the floor.
And Layla's been in shoes quite a lot, actually.
Heels.
No, she's going to do that at the studios.
Oh yeah.
You like heels.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting.
It's another layer, isn't it? What you wear. And
Well, the first, one of the things that was probably quite important when we arrived in the green room and we were deciding what was in and out. There were a lot of chairs in there and tables, and we immediately decided between us through a sort of yes/no thing that we wouldn't have anything bar some a few chairs. That meant we were going to work on the floor, and I really enjoyed working on the floor. So maybe I've worked barefoot quite a lot, haven't I?
yeah,
But
I think there's something about the fact that
being
we were
on
on
paper,
paper.
it's really, it's really.
But the carpet, shoes. That was a shoes.
I've been barefoot on the carpet too.
Yeah.
Isn't it very clean, that carpet?
I think we should probably bring this to an end as we're approaching 4 o'clock.
Sorry.
Thank you everyone for being part of this sharing.